Hi, I'm Nick Haig, and welcome to the World's Greatest Business Thinkers podcast. Greg Hahn is the co-founder and chief creative officer of Mischief. He's one of the most decorated creatives to walk this earth, having been awarded 2 Emmys and multiple Cannes Grand Prix. In fact, wherever Greg goes, he waves his creative wand and the accolades come in. Whilst at his previous agency at BBDO, New York, they were recognised as the most awarded agency in the world. Then, in 2020, he created Mischief, and in the short time they've been in existence, they've won multiple awards, including Agency of the Year for 2 years in succession, as well as the most innovative agency, and voted one of 20 most creative companies in the world by GQ last year. If you want to know how to start and build a brand to be one of those admired in the world, as well as truly understand what it takes to create award-winning adverts, then this is the podcast for you. And remember, if you like what you hear, then click the subscribe button on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, and leave a review. I'd love to hear what you think of the show. Welcome to the World's Greatest Business Thinkers podcast, Greg.
Thank you. Wow, that's quite a title you make me live up to. Just being invited to this is kind of like, I feel like I won something, so thank you.
Well, it's not the only thing you've won, Greg, and all the awards and the great work that you've been doing. We'll definitely cover all that off today. I think a good starting point for the podcast is to just understand how you fell into the advertising world, because I think just doing some research on you originally studied journalism and psychology.
Yeah, those were the two things I was really interested in college, but then quickly learned that they weren't so interesting to me. I still like psychology, but journalism was a little bit too regimented. But I did find advertising as a great blend between the two. It's like sort of where there's a big crossover between the writing and the human behavior that I like, both those parts of it. So somehow decided that advertising would be a good place for me to land both those kind of passions. Yeah, kind of worked out that way.
Well, I suppose you never quite know where you land. I'm a geologist. I studied that at university, but it wasn't because I wanted to be a geologist. It was just because it was the best subject I did at school, and so not really know what we're going to do in life.
That's the beautiful thing about advertising. So there's like no wasted knowledge. Anything that you learn can be used in your day-to-day work, and the more interesting, esoteric, and weirder, almost the better, because you're drawing on resources that nobody else is pulling from.
Absolutely, yeah. So you started life out at Fallon, where you worked for 9 years, and then you moved to BBDO, where you spent another 14 years of your working life, rising to CCO there. But I'd like us to jump to April 2020, and you get the call during the midst of COVID that you're expendable and therefore sacked in front of the world from BBDO. And I remember, seeing this play out and thinking, Jesus, nobody's safe if Greg Hahn's gone. So, silly question, but maybe what were your initial feelings at this time?
Well, I certainly wasn't safe. They didn't use the word expendable, but that's pretty much the subtext of the conversation. It was just a really, really chaotic time in advertising and the world. This is very early in the pandemic, and nobody could wrap their heads around what was going on. People were just getting laid off. I mean, I think there were in the BBDO network 300 people that got let go that day. And 100 of those out of New York. So it wasn't like I was alone. So that was kind of, one thing I was trying to deal with is like, this is a world industry thing. So what does this mean for me? But beyond that, what does it mean for the industry and for the world and where things are going? And nobody kind of knew that. So the good side and bad side of that is like, it was uncharted territory, and it was kind of open space to build something. And I did feel like even before that, there was this sort of struggle in advertising where big agencies quite didn't know what they were to be, where to go from here. And they were struggling just to keep small accounts. And it just felt like it was a good time for a shakeup. And this was the thing that catalyzed that.
Yeah. Well, I survived COVID, but in my previous life, I was the original founder of B2B International, which is a global market research agency, and we were bought by Dentsu. And there's only a handful of people that know this, but I too was made redundant from my position of head of growth at the end of 2023, but mine wasn't quite as public as yours. But I had to toe the line to say it was the right time to move on, blah, blah, blah. not seem to be sacking the founder. But I was shell shocked like you, but I didn't hang around for long. I called on some business contacts to
Yeah.
set up a new podcast, and in order to keep this grey matter going, and here it is now. So, I mean, I suppose there's nothing like airing dirty laundry in public, but I've just done that. But I think you moved quicker than me, because within a few weeks you'd set up Mischief. And
Oh
do you,
yeah.
do you think you'd have set up Mischief, or your own agency at least, if your hand hadn't been forced?
No, I don't think so at all. I was very comfortable at BBDO, and that may have been like a bad thing for me personally because I was doing good work. I felt was treated pretty well up until that one phone call, but we I had a good run there, and I could have easily spent the next 10 years doing the exact same thing and just trying to make that place as good as it possibly could be. And I But once that ended and I stepped out of it, I was just like, God, I could have done that, but I wasn't really super happy. I wasn't like excited to get out of bed and go to work every day. I just think the whole world was kind of feeling that malaise, and I just needed something different. But you're right, it came together pretty quickly, but that wasn't because it was like the first or last thing that was on my plate or something I'd been planning. It was
Yeah,
just as soon as this happened, day one, I was already like talking to people who had their hands in the industry and knew what was going on. And, a lot of people reached out to me. I would have done whatever I could to keep this below the radar, the fact that I got let go and the fact that, the way it happened. And I did not want it to be public, but I had no choice because it ended up on the front page of Ad Age the next day. So, you know, I was really, shocked and kind of bummed by that, but it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me
yeah,
because it had a built-in story and people started reaching out to me. And then I kind of felt a lot of support from the industry because people were feeling the same way. Everyone's so vulnerable and again, in the same boat as I, or thinking they will soon be. So it became a good thing. I think that it happened so publicly.
yeah. No, for sure. And I think the biggest stifling issue for a lot of people maybe is starting a business. There's so many unknowns, isn't there? You might have a great idea, but you're not the specialist in finance or HR, so you don't make
Yes.
that jump. Too much
Oh,
risk.
I had no idea how to do that stuff. That's why I didn't do it. But that's the importance. The key learning there is like find people who are really good at that stuff. And I met a partner, Dave LaFont, and his partner, Serge Rancourt, who had run big agencies in Canada and also had run this new venture, No Fixed Address, for the last few years. And those guys are good. Like they know what they're doing and super creative, but also they have this business background and know how to set up in major companies and independents. And they have
Yeah,
this same passion to build a place built around people and super independent and make the work and the people the driving priority.
yeah, yeah.
So find people that are good at the things you're not and partner with them if you allow. That'd be my advice.
Well, no, that is good advice. So you started Mischief, and to paraphrase you started a place that was more offense than defense, was focused on winning than worrying about losing. What do you mean by this?
Well, I did feel like in this world of holding company agencies, there's so much pressure not to lose. Like, can't lose a client at all costs. And if you're in a pitch, you're like afraid of saying the wrong thing because you don't want. And it just felt like so much pressure and so much stifling of energy, and like fear was so pervasive throughout the industry at that time, and especially networks who are answering to shareholders. I just want to wipe all that off the table and just start clean and go. What would the mantra of No Fixed Address and Mischief is? What would you do if you weren't afraid? And
Yeah,
that's kind of a good place to start. And that's what I mean by saying where offense is. To paraphrase Janis Joplin, like when you've got nothing, you got nothing to lose. So we just went in like we're going to be ourselves. We're going to be who we are. We're going to build this place the way we would want to do it and not worry about what shareholders think or anybody. We're beholden to nobody but ourselves.
yeah. I bet it was so refreshing, that, wasn't it? I mean, as I said previously, as a market research agency, we were part of Dentsu, so I worked alongside a number of creatives. But I don't really know the creative sector that well. Do you think playing it safe is a big problem to advertising today?
Yeah, I do. I think that what I've learned is clients don't necessarily even want that. Like
Yeah.
we have a lot of big clients that were saying our agencies are so afraid of us. They would never bring us stuff like this. They don't challenge us. They've grown complacent. So, I would urge any agency to be okay with shaking up things and having conversations with your clients, because I do think that everybody's kind of learning the price of invisibility is pretty high.
Yeah. Yeah. When I started my previous agency from scratch 25 years ago now, it was easy to create the right culture. There was only three of us. We were always in the office, as remote working wasn't a thing back then. So it was easier to set the direction of travel for culture that we wanted to create. But you know, creating Mischief, and as your agency grows, it does get trickier to keep the culture, especially in these post-COVID world where working from home is the norm. So you've had a pretty meteoric rise over the last 5 years. But how have you kept the Mischief culture and not compromise this identity that
Yeah.
you've grown and people know?
Well, I will say that is my highest priority, and we've been very. You have to be very diligent about that, and it's not an accident that as we grow, we hopefully the work gets doesn't remain doesn't get compromised at all, and the passion is still there, because we hire very slowly, but we also have a very strong ethos and a very strong set of principles that we hire by and that we live by, and we try to make very clear to both us and our clients. So
Yeah,
if everyone's online in the same North Star and the same mission, it becomes easy to grow and scale without losing your soul, because we're all in it for the same reasons. Because as soon as you start taking on a client that is for money or some other reason, then suddenly your values become compromised and you're not all doing leading towards the same direction. I think
yeah,
as we grow, it's as long as we're heading towards the same direction, we can get bigger.
yeah. Yeah, you're right. It's really important, isn't it, about having that North Star so everyone knows what
Yeah. Which
the
is like, kind of the value of naming the agency Mischief is because we kind of know what, our North Star is our name. We kind of know what kind of work we want to put out there, what our vibe is. And if you're a big client that doesn't want work that shakes things up and is a little bit playful and in there to make a stir, then, you're probably not even going to call us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that from the 25 years of trying to create that culture and keep the culture, then you can't sell your soul to the devil, can you? Just to win clients in and compromise that good work. There's nothing like a culture killer than doing that. So
Yeah.
you know, it's about finding the right fit, but inevitably doing that right work and the growth will
Yeah,
follow.
it's 100% based on you and the clients being aligned on that, because it is a snowball effect. If you take one wrong client, then suddenly, it starts to drive the agency. You start making decisions based on what's going to keep them and not what's right. And then you have to hire people who want to actually work on that. It may not be the same quality of people who, originally came there. So we're trying to eliminate all that kind of stuff
Yeah.
and make sure that we're as picky about the clients we work with as the client is.
Yeah. I don't know whether they're your brand values actually, but on your website you state 10 things you believe
Yeah,
to be true.
yeah, yeah. Those are
Uh, I absolutely love those. I mean, I think it certainly typifies what people know about Mischief, and I love them all. I think the first 2 points, we're here to make a stir, and second, indifference is the enemy. The riskiest thing we can do is be ignorable.
Yeah, and those are put out there for our clients, or prospective clients to see. So, again, it's all about like, are you on the same boat and heading the same direction, or is everybody kind of steering their own way? As long as we keep, we all agree on that principle and work your way down, then I think we're gonna, all be in great shape.
How many people are within the company now?
We have shared services with No Fixed Address, which is the company I started with. But very few of those. Like now, I think independently, Mischief has 100 and I'm going to say 106.
Right. And how do you balance that in office versus working from home?
We just moved to an awesome new space. I think the key to in office, mandates or whatever you want to call them, is the mandate should be making a place that people want to come to work,
Yeah.
not relying on Big Brother looking down at you. So we have 2 days that we all kind of they're called quote unquote mandatory days, but those are 2 days that the people are going to gather and be there. but people come in more than that. And if you're long distance, because we still do hire a few people that work long distance, then obviously you come into town when you're in town, but you can't every day.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
just try to make it work with people. I mean, we're all adults, but I think there's value to us being together. I always love our end days, and people show up. It's fun, and you get a lot of stuff done. But also, I understand that the world's changed, and we have to work around. Some people can't commute every day.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think people are looking to go in now as well, aren't they? Like
Yeah,
we pass, just straight after COVID, used to have to offer
yeah,
pizza to come in at lunch and
yeah.
things like
It,
that too.
the fact that we're not retrofitting an old building that we've been in for 20 years to try and make it like we built this place knowing that we want to be a space people want to hang out in. And it's pretty fun, especially for you have a lot of young people that live in Brooklyn. It's in Brooklyn, but they also have roommates, and this is a place to kind of actually they come work when we're on our off days, like 5 days a week. So
Yeah.
it's a good time.
Yeah. So you've not only been winning awards just for the advertising work that you've been doing, Greg, but you were voted as one of the 20 most creative companies in the world in 2024, alongside the likes of Apple, Prada, Tesla, and LVMH. How did that make you feel?
I mean, that's great. I mean, any recognition is always like it's humbling to me, to be honest with you. Um, But that one was really super special because I want Mischief to live outside the world of advertising. Obviously, this is my world. I live inside this bubble, and I kind of like it. But to become a brand and to become something that is looked at and viewed from outside, alongside some of those other companies, is like amazing to me.
Yeah.
And I don't think we submitted for it. They just heard of us. Yeah, and to be in that company, and so few, it's only 20 of them, was like really a good sign for us.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's some company that you're keeping there, isn't it, within those?
Yeah, I know. It's Apple and Tesla and all these places. So glad to be on that list. Yeah, it's been
Yeah.
cool.
You've worked with some of the biggest brands in the world in your career so far. Are you? This is a difficult question, I know, but are you able to choose a favorite ad campaign that you've created? Who is it for, and why is it your favorite?
Man, that's really hard to say because each one is like for different reasons.
Yeah.
What they meant to me personally in my career. Where they took me, or just what I learned from them, or the experience of doing it. They're all different.
Yeah.
If I had to point one that kind of made a breakthrough for the biggest breakthrough, I'd probably say HBO Voyeur. If
Okay.
you're not familiar with it, it's
No. Well, speaking to you from the UK, could you? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
The
It's
background.
old. It's old. It's like the reason I'm pointing to it is because like it was in the first or second year I got to BBDO, and BBDO is a very different place. BBDO in New York is very TV centric and very traditional, quote unquote. And they brought David Lubars in to change things up and bring them into a new age. And he brought me in to help him with that. And I think that was the biggest marker that this is a new kind of BBDO because it was experiential, it was digital in ways that had never been done before, and it was just a really fun project. Like the client was amazing. It was HBO. They gave us so much freedom. It was like a huge budget. It was like a 10-day shoot with Jake Scott, and one of the hardest projects I've ever had to pull off as a writer and creative. And it just embodied a lot of things that went right with with the industry at that time. And I still look back on it. It was one of the first things that like got at Cannes. It was at the time where you could multiple categories were starting to open up. So one at that time was like the most awarded campaign at Cannes in
Yeah.
history because it was so eligible for so many different kind of categories. Since been trounced by because now there's even more categories. But at that time, it was like the big winner. So I always have fond memories of that one for a lot of different reasons.
And how important is the brief from the client in order to deliver award-winning work? Do you need more information than less, or do you need?
We always need to be clear on what the problem is we're trying to solve. And I think we take their brief and their information. It's a lot of times it's necessarily drier because it's not meant for creatives, and then we find insights and try to find ways in around that. And then we, it's very iterative the way we work with clients. I think strategy is our secret weapon to success. We are very strategic. We spend a lot of time on strategy, and creatives are involved in that part of it. So, strategy and creative are like one department at Mischief.
Rory Sutherland was my guest on the previous podcast, and I know you and him share an interest for murder programs. And
Yeah.
I know that is because
I don't know if I want to be known for that, but I do probably like my unfair share of murder content.
murder mystery shows, and you said in your post that you see murder mystery shows and advertising as having a lot in common. So I'm quite interested to just dig deeper on that, and because I thought
it's probably Rory that pointed it out, because I always thought, is it just me? But there are a lot of marketing people that since I wrote that, I was like, oh my god, that's me too. Like, and a lot of advertising people, and they've drawn these parallels. But I do think there's something interesting in the theory that if you look at a crime and a murder and have to solve that, it is in many ways like what we do in advertising marketing. In other words, you start with the KPI, the end result. There's a body, there's a murder. Okay, in marketing, we'll say that's the end result, the KPI, what we want to accomplish. Then you work your way back through all the various possibilities that would lead you to that end result. That's kind of what happens in every murder mystery. And even the most off the wall kind of out of the box theories or thinking, you have to investigate. And it also is like, once someone puts all those dots together, it all makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way it is in advertising. Once you see the result and how you got there, it should all be logical and make perfect sense. Might seem crazy, but once you see the steps, it all tracks.
No, I totally get that. And it's the obviousness that comes through, but only when someone really gets it, that aha moment, or points it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And when someone shows you how the murder was committed, you're like, that everything lines up perfectly to get you to that result.
Yeah. Sticking with Rory,
on murder.
On each of my podcasts, I ask the previous guest to post a question to the upcoming guest, and Rory's question to you, Greg, of course, it's highly integral in terms of his behavioral science. So he said, do you find that behavioral science is a useful part of legitimizing mischief without it merely seeming like witful perversity?
Absolutely. We do so much. Rory is like one of my heroes, because the way he approaches problems is very similar to the way that Mischief approaches problems. And the fact that it is called a science really helps people buy into it. But yeah, there's many of our campaigns are, directly sort of like inspired by a learning that we've done from behavioral economics or just out in the world. And, we've done a lot of experiments that become our ads, and testing a lot of things, hypotheses. Yeah. And also just being able to pin it down to actual thinking and, rigor of science that led us to this quote unquote crazy execution really, helps solidify the thinking in a good way. I could probably give you like a ton of examples, but one that comes to mind based off of like a very strong principle we learned from behavioral science is, I remember reading a paper from someone from, I think it was Harvard Business Review. I wish I remembered the professor's name, but his whole philosophy was like on brands are hired to do a job. And it's like, what job is your brand hired to do? And it's usually not the one on the package. People will unveil like what they really used it for. Yeah. So that really came into play. We were doing this thing for Capri Sun, and we learned that, a lot of parents use Capri Sun, the drink. It's a drink that comes in a pouch, and it's really fun to drink. Not to, give their kids the thirst quenching nutrition of fruit juice, but to shut their kids up for a minute or two, right? Yeah. So that was really what they were hiring. That was the value of this product, was just some peace and quiet for parents for a little bit while they drank that juice. And so we repositioned, we did a fun experiment where we repositioned Capri Sun juice as noise kid canceling technology. Yeah. So we sold it in electronic stores in boxes, and we did like this fun hidden camera film where we explained that this will give you 2 minutes of peace. It's like noise canceling technology for your kid. It was really fun. It was like a good way to reposition it and claim a value that parents already kind of had in the back of their heads. So directly based off of behavioral science, like what are people actually using your product for?
B2B Frameworks is a curated collection of proven business frameworks to develop your strategic thinking skills, solve your biggest business problems, and unlock your next promotion. Our mission is to help you achieve these goals. We want to create the next generation of successful business leaders by providing the tools and frameworks needed to create effective strategies that drive business growth. Each framework comes with a downloadable set of instructions with large, colourful diagrams and editable templates to guide you through the process step by step and prompt you to consider the problem from every possible angle. Along with audio guides and educational tools, our extensive content library is full of real-world examples and case studies of strategic thinking in action. So why learn with B2B Frameworks? We've carefully curated only the most effective, proven business and marketing frameworks. Our downloadable materials and audio guides will help you easily apply each framework. And the insights and advice you'll find across the site are based on 30 years of consulting experience from one of the world's leading business strategy experts, Paul Haig. B2B Frameworks is a small investment to advance your career or grow your business. Start your journey to becoming a successful business leader by joining B2B Frameworks today. I absolutely love what you did with that, and especially because changing the channel of how you were selling it as well. That was really insightful. I know Capri Sun. We get it over here in the UK. I think as kids we used to put it in the freezer and use it as a nice pop. So that could give you 30 minutes of quiet time doing that.
Yeah, that's a good piece of behavioral science there too.
Yeah. So, in terms of adverts, I'm here in the UK, and the big event here is always, well, in the advertising world, is Christmas time, as you know. Whereas in the US, it's all about the Super Bowl ads, and arguably that's the biggest audience shared experience in the world. We've just had the Super Bowl, haven't we, a few weeks ago? But I know Tubi is a free streaming service that's now here in the UK, but what you did to get brand recognition in the early days in the US was genius, I thought, with the interface. I don't know whether it's called this, but the interface interruption advert.
Yeah, I think that was the internal name we gave it. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. I mean, it really is groundbreaking. Can you give our listeners a bit of background to what you did there?
Yeah, I mean, it so happened that Tubi is owned by Fox Network, which was airing the Super Bowl. So they gave us 15 seconds of airtime, along with, we did a longer brand 60, but we had this 15 seconds as well. And what we did was we knew that, Super Bowl is a time when everybody's just like focused on the TV, and, it's sometimes can get tense. So we thought, what would it be fun if we made it look like somebody in the room had decided they'd rather watch Tubi than the Super Bowl. So we had it appear as if someone grabbed their, on your screen, that Tubi suddenly came up. You saw the menu, you saw the arrow go down, and someone switching the channel to, I think we just picked a movie at random. Those kind of, not the Super Bowl. It was like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, a romantic comedy kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, and it appeared that, the Super Bowl had switched from the game to this, and people freaked out. And then we just put the Tubi logo on and, back to the game. But what that did is our briefer from the client was we just want people talking about what the fuck is Tubi, and then going on and learning more about it. And it certainly did that. Got a lot of talk, it got a lot of buzz, and became the most kind of socially buzzed campaign or spot of the year. And it was a 15-second quick little, did the edit in in-house basically.
When you look back at it, I mean, and am I right in saying that the two presenters were exactly the two presenters in the
which is a good point. That's kind of the beauty of being on Fox, because they said, well, Fox said we could use their announcers, so it really looked like they're coming back to the game, and they're the same guys that were just seen throughout the game came back to introduce this, and we allowed us to introduce them or to interrupt them mid conversation. You couldn't do that unless we had that partnership with the network.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think I looked at some of the stats, but like 1 billion views on TikTok, or it just went through
Yeah.
the roof, didn't it? In terms
Yeah,
of
yeah. And the business result, it took them from their stats are. This is all on our website if anybody wants to check out the work, which is mischiefUSA.com. Plug for the website, but yeah, the stats are incredible. But I do like a couple of things that have happened, to us at Mischief is we love it when the CEO or the head of the brand or even the company has mentioned our campaign in their earnings call as two reasons why their growth has gone up, and that's happened to us quite a few times. And that was one, and then Tinder is another, and I believe Chili's has been on such a big run, but
right.
they've worked with a lot of partners, but we're one of those as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the other adverts you did, it was Rabbit Hole, it was called, and then Cowboy Hat. I've been down a rabbit
Yeah,
hole
yeah.
with the adverts on Mischief, your websites, where it's excellent to look at the great work that you've done there. And I think that the Cowboy Boy one, that was the most recent one, and I love that because it's about just being yourself, not being a sheep and following the herd. It's
Yeah,
about plowing your own furrow, about who you want to
yeah.
be.
That's a good example of it seems weird on the outside. You look at it like, what, this is fucking weird and crazy, but you got the message, which is, there's a very strong message in there, which is watch what you want to watch and don't, because there's so much pressure in today's streaming world to be on top of the hottest shows and the prestige shows. And most people, you know, aren't even interested in them, but they have to watch it because that's what everyone else is watching to keep up with the conversation and try to be, blend in. Like to this day, I haven't watched Shogun. And I still feel guilty about it. But right now it's like a homework to do it at this point. But the Tubi is all about like watch what you want to watch, not what if it's your thing, it's your thing. Go for it. It's not what society's telling you to watch. So
So,
that was the message in that, and we just found an interesting standout way to deliver that.
would you recommend it for murder mysteries then?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, for sure. That's the place where you can watch any episode of Columbo from the beginning. In that that for a while, believe it or not, that was their strongest brand polling show, like in the brand was
Right. Okay.
to watch Columbo. So I'm not alone. It may be scary how much murder content is out there, but it's so funny you could go down that rabbit hole. There's like so many niche reality murder shows. It's like this is way more common than one would think, like to think.
Well, do you know what? I haven't even looked down the Tubi, download the app and gone down that yet.
You
So
should. It's very addictive in the way
that's my
that in the way that TikTok, they just know what you like and find it, and it's a good way to find content.
excellent. I will do that. So you've created some fabulous adverts just in the short time that you've been in existence at Mischief, and we've talked to Tubi, Capri Sun, Tinder you mentioned was award winning, Cause Light. Have you worked with any B2B brands on their campaigns?
Yeah, we worked with a company called Register RN, which is or Connect RN, which is to get nurses into the industry. It's like a recruitment thing, and they're great. You can check out our work for them, and we also have done a lot of business to business with Tubi, by the way, which is Tubi advertising to media buyers. So
Right.
it's a very specific audience, and we've done some really fun work with them. It's been some of our most, our biggest campaigns that are under the radar are towards media buyers, and so that's a whole business thing. But in both those cases, it's really just understanding the mindset of who specifically you're talking to, because their motivations are quite different, but at the same time they're human. So, first and foremost, they have to be acknowledged and entertained. So you can't just speak to them like you are solely a business person, and that is all we're going to relate to you on. There's a big human element and entertainment aspect that has to happen as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and as you say, we business people are humans with emotions after all. So,
Yeah,
is it building a B2B campaign the same as building a B2C campaign? Do you approach B2B
yeah.
advertising in a different way or not?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think the same motivations. There's just slightly different parameters that you put on it, but I think even more so for B2B, there's so much at stake. Like what you want to go to your boss and recommend, supposedly if that's your job, is to work with this partner. You have to be confident in them, and you have to know that you're not going to look stupid recommending them. So that's why I think fame is super important when you're talking B2B. Fame within outside of your industry, like so when you go to whoever needs to approve of the decision to work with this, it's not like, who the hell are you telling me to work with? It's like, oh yeah, I've seen these guys, I've heard of them, I know they're out there, and
Yeah.
their reputation is important. So I think if I was business to business, I would broaden the market to not just the one-on-one business to business people, but make sure that there's an element of fame involved.
You mentioned fame, and actually, my next guest is Jenny Romaniak from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. She's all about brand building, working alongside Byron Sharp, but
Yeah.
she very much talks about fame,
Oh, great.
especially relating it to building a brand.
Oh, that's
So
excellent. Yeah.
we'll definitely dig into that on the next podcast.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I would love to hear what she has to say about that. But my feeling is that it's never been more important to have fame. And I know there's been a lot of talk and a lot of obsession over performance and the efficiency of just reaching people who are ready to buy your product or who might be interested in buying your product. But I think there's a huge value in everybody or people outside that group knowing about your product, especially for luxury brands. Like, there's no sense in buying an emblem or a symbol if nobody knows what it means besides you, right?
Yeah.
So I think, like, for luxury, like, you should, quote unquote, waste a lot of money if you're selling an $80,000 car on people who will never, be in the market for that car, because they will be seeing the people driving that car. It's what it says about you. It's what this brand says about you as much as what the brand says about itself.
Yeah. You've got to stroke the ego of those buyers to make sure that
Yeah. So efficiency is not always the key driver in those decisions, I would think.
What advice would you give to someone who's thinking of getting into the advertising industry today? Is it very different than when you first started at Fallon, do you think? Or
In some ways, the industry has changed a lot, but my advice wouldn't. A couple of things I would say. One is just, like, be a student of human behavior, because those things that drive people, that motivate people, that swirl around in their heads will never change. So that, I would say, is like going to be your key advantage, is if you're deeply in touch with that and an insightful thinker and always looking for reasons why someone is doing something, then you'll find the answers. I do think that, you have to keep in touch with what's happening in technology and the way people are communicating, but that's always going to change, and that's constant. You have to keep it up to speed with that. But again, stick with the thing. Always know the thing that's not going to change, and that's what drives humans. So keep, do your homework, learn what's out there, keep current, but also don't do that in lieu of understanding basic principles of human psychology.
You mentioned technology there, Greg. How do you feel about AI and the ease of being able to create things creatively these days with AI? Does that worry you about the industry?
No, I do think it's a tool. It's like any, you have to learn how to use it. I don't think we're quite there yet, but it's not far. There's some really good thinking happening from AI, which is scary to say. I think executionally, we're not there yet. You can always see it. It's still at the mode where it's creepy, but I could definitely see it integrating one or two shots in a huge film that would have taken you months to pull off, and thousands of people and all this kind of stuff being done in an afternoon. Like, that's going to happen. It's sort of happening now, but there's human level of taste that's always going to be, required. And I do think that there's going to be more emphasis put on feeling like this is made by man and not machine, and connecting with people. And there's going to be great skill in creative directing, because you don't want AI making intuitive choices. There's still gut feelings that are the result of thousands of years of evolution of us kind of being able to sense things that aren't quite computable yet. Just being out there, there's gut feeling, and so far can't manufacture it though.
Yeah. This podcast is sponsored by B2B Frameworks, and you've worked on some of the world's biggest advertising campaigns over the years. Do you have a particular business or marketing framework that you typically use when working on campaigns?
Yeah, at Mischief, we're very straightforward about our process, and it's a two-step process. The first is what to say, and the second is how to say it. And I think the problem is most people just jump to the execution. The second, how to say. We spend 90% of our time on what we're trying to say, make sure we're clear about that, come up with something interesting to say there, and that's strategy. And it comes down to the spend 90% of your time sharpening the axe, and then 10% chopping the tree, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's our process: is first what to say, be very clear about that, figure that out, and then how to say it's kind of the fun part, and explore every possible um, direction in the second phase, but make sure it's grounded in strategy.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because we only see the polished finished product,
Right.
don't we? But the amount of time and research and depth that's gone into it to build the
Yeah.
tone to then deliver the advert is
Yeah. It comes back to this theme of like our ideas should seem perfectly obvious, but only after we do them. Right. So it's like, should be surprising and holy shit, how did you ever sell that? How did you get them to do that? Where'd you guys ever come up with it? And then once we, show them the steps and the very logical steps to get there, it's like, of course they're going to buy that because it makes perfect sense. It's not a flight of fancy. It's a flight of logic.
Yeah. Yeah. So to conclude, Greg, I'd like to finish on my quickfire questions I ask all my guests, and we put it out there to the listeners, to the public, to come through with questions. So, firstly, a couple of questions from the listeners. One from Paul McFarlane in St. Louis. He said, "How do you plan to make Mischief's second generation even better than the first?"
Well, that all comes back to what we were talking about before, is just hiring for the culture and having everybody understand what kind of people make, like why they're here, and what our mission is, and what kind of people we strive to build. And we have a very strong bench. It is important to me. Our ECDs, Bianca, Kevin, who I brought in the creative department, are still pretty young, relatively speaking, and
Yeah.
their growth and expansion at Mischief is going to be key to how we grow. And just bringing in people who are clear on the mission in the Mischief mission, and everybody sailing towards the same North Star.
Yeah. Yeah. And secondly, this is from Suzanne Nolan in San Francisco. She asks, "What keeps you awake at night?"
It's so funny. It's the same theme. It's like just making sure as we grow, we don't lose our magic.
Yeah.
As long as we're diligent about that. We've seen so many stories of, flashes in the pan, and I've always liked to think of us as a eternal flame in the pan. Like we don't want to burn out. We just want to maintain, like, Wyden is such a good, role model for us. Like they've continued to do it and keep their purity, and they just showed that it can be done. So my biggest fear, and the thing that does keep me up at night, is just making sure that we don't lose it.
Yeah.
We keep building and growing and expanding in ways that are pure to us.
Well, and I think I had that same fear, I suppose, if you like, when I was in the agency world, that you're only as good as your last job, aren't you?
Yeah.
And, so you're always looking to better it and stay sharp. And
yeah, I think that's ingrained in every creative, is like they're always paranoid that, you're only as good as the last thing you do. And no matter what, I've been doing this for so long, I'm still feel that way.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you still got that spark, Greg. So what's the best piece of business advice you've ever been given?
Yeah, I've said this before, but it's really stuck with me. It's so simple, and it's basically a line that I found. I've told this story before, but when I was a junior trying to break into advertising, I had no idea how to start or where to begin. So, I thought what you do is you go to the business section of the library, or the bookstore at that time, and look up how to get a job in advertising, right? But anyway, happened to be in the business section, and there was like one small little book that said how to be successful in business. It's like, okay, sounds like something I should probably read. It's got all the answers, and surprisingly, it did have the answer, because just on one page, it said something that really stuck with me, and I've kind of used it a lot. Is the one thing that they said was, successful people do what unsuccessful people aren't willing to do, and that's it. It's that simple. So anytime I think about, like, oh God, do I really want to go to this meeting or fly this, 7 hours to go to do this 1 hour meeting, and it's like, I don't have to. But
Yeah.
successful people do what unsuccessful people aren't willing to do. And I
Yeah.
have to be willing to do that kind of thing. So that, as a leader, I think of that now. But when I was growing up, it's like, sure, I could get by with this ad. It's good enough,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to, like, there are a lot of people that would turn this in, but I can't if I'm trying to be as best as I can be, or I can't, I could get by with not redoing my entire book this year, but, comes back to that principle. That's the easy thing to do. And, another thing I've kind of felt is like, when those times get, it's like, yeah, this is what hard feels like.
Yeah.
And the reason that a lot of people stop is because this is what it feels like. It's hard. So,
Yeah.
the few people that push on are the people that are in that select group, and I always strive to, keep to be there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Push yourself. Don't sit within your comfort zone. Be bold and keep keep pushing on.
yeah.
Yeah. I think that's great. Um, who would you like me to reach out to and invite to come on this podcast in the future?
I mean, I would love to hear. He doesn't do a lot of them, and maybe other people. Dave Trott, he's just genius. Do you know David Trott?
Well, I do know. I don't know him personally, but in fact, Rory said exactly the same.
Did he really? Oh my God, Roy and I are like,
He-
that's me just like, saying whatever Roy says. No, so I'll give you a different one then. Well,
well, but I will reach out to Dave, and in fact,
yeah,
Rory.
there's apparently a demand, especially among the focus group of two. David Droga also, like, brilliant businessman, great creative thinker, but wow, look where he's taken his 5-person agency. And
Yeah.
then, just to shake things up, Liz Taylor is someone who's always fun to talk to, and she's at the top of her game at a really large corporation. So it'd be fun to see how she, managed to do that as a creative.
Well, those three that you mentioned there, I'd love them all to come on. I might need, maybe an email from you, Greg, and your persuasion to get them
I
on.
don't know Dave Trott. I sure would like to know him. I Droga, tangentially know he's been great. He helped me. I had a 10-minute call with him before I started Mischief, and it was probably the most valuable business 10 minutes I've spent in my, including the 4 years at Ohio State.
Yeah.
Yeah, I learned more than that call than ever. So you will learn a lot by having him on the podcast.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. He'd be the perfect guest. And finally, my next guest is Jenny Romaniak from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. We talked about it earlier. What question would you like me to pose to her?
Oh yeah, well, sort of go back to our conversation earlier. Is like, how valuable does she think it is for brands to be famous beyond their niche market, especially business to business brands? And that comes back to like efficiency versus brand.
Yeah.
Like, there's a drive through performance and spending your money there, and then there's the other argument. It's the oldest argument in advertising at this point. At least the oldest new argument, which is brand versus performance. And I see an argument for both, maybe a little bit more towards brand because of the halo effect. Just see where her head's at on that.
Absolutely. Well, I'll pose that. I'm speaking to her next week. So, yeah,
There's
thanks.
a question in there somewhere for her.
Well, Greg, I've loved every minute of our conversation today. What you and the team at Mischief have done is a reminder to us all the need to be brave, to have no fear. I mean, the creative industry is all about pushing the usual boundaries and shaking things up and trying new stuff out. I know, but and also you won't please all the people all the time, but that doesn't matter. The best ads don't happen by accident, as you say. There's lots of strategy and work goes in before that, but they follow. I suppose they follow those principles of attention, emotion, and definitely storytelling within all the adverts that you put out. So
yeah, that's it.
I thought I'd finish on one of Mischief's brand values. We talked about them before, and there's 10 of them on the website, everyone. So have a look at that. But it definitely typifies the journey you've been on so far. And one of them was, if you focus on what makes you special, the money will follow. If you focus on the money, you'll cease to be special. And you've definitely focused on what makes you special. So wise
Thank
word
you.
for all
Thank you.
those.
That is one we do definitely try to live by. That was one of our day one principles.
Yeah, well, I do love all those 10. So we've talked about your website. If anyone's got any questions, want to get in touch with you, Greg, how best is it via the website? Is it LinkedIn?
Yeah, there's a lot of different email addresses on if you go to contact, like depending what your question is. They can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I will say I'm setting myself up to be an asshole because it's really hard for me to reply to everybody, and I feel I know what it's like to send that message and wait. But don't feel bad; it's not personal. But if you want to follow me on LinkedIn or DM me, I can't guarantee you a job, but I can try to help you out if I can.
Well, I know you are busy, Greg, and rightly so from all the great work you've done. So thank you very much for joining us today, for all that your worldly insights on the advertising industry, and good luck for the future.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been a pleasure.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah. Got it.
This podcast has been brought to you in partnership with Awards International. Awards International is dedicated to running successful business awards programs and conferences. Founded in 2008 by Don Hales and Neil Skihel, the company's core mission centers on honoring and celebrating exceptional achievements in customer and employee experience, but also in overall business excellence across diverse sectors. In addition, their aim is to showcase best practices, innovations, and achievements that contribute positively to these areas, ultimately inspiring other organizations to improve their own customer experience, employee engagement strategies, and overall business success. To find out more about Awards International and how to register your interest in their awards programs, check their website www.awardsinternational.com.